Hello, friends, and welcome back to Stories About Entitled People. In our first story, the OP reported his manager's shady practices and got him fired and was offered his job. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss a new video every single day. Sit comfortably. Here we go. How I got my boss fired when he tried to fire me. Starting out, let me explain why there wasn't a mass walkout and I'm the only one that quit despite us basically being terrorized and treated like slaves. The job market was in shambles in my city at that time with something like a 40% unemployment rate. I knew someone with a doctorate degree in theoretical physics working at a local fast food joint as it was literally the only place hiring. The city had quick access to 4 research universities, but he got downsized due to lower admission rates. He's now the dean of the physics department at his former school. To quit any job, no matter how bad, was financial suicide, and a guarantee that you would not find a new one. I also worked customer service, food service, and hospitality since I was 14. At 24, I decided it was time to find a job with benefits and potential for career advancement. So I took a job stocking shelves overnight with a global monstrosity that started out as a mom-and-pop store. I felt right at home. I worked hard and constantly took the worst jobs and the worst days off to make sure I would be there on the weakest staffing days to rub elbows with management. If there was anything that occasionally came up that no one on the shift was trained to do, I would come in on my day off without pay to get trained on how to do the task, like keys, paint, accounting issues, etc., to become less disposable and more versatile. It worked, and 10 months in, I found myself with an offer to promote to low-level management starting January 1. Starting the weekend before Thanksgiving, the overnight manager started to understaff shifts to preserve his end-of-year bonus and acted surprised when people called out. He would then bully us into staying over with threats of write-ups for not finishing our assigned stocking tasks. Upper management was notorious for just signing off on write-ups without looking at their validity, so each staff being assigned 13-plus hours of labor to complete alone in 6 hours, while typically it was approximately 4.5 hours to account for tending to customers as well, was no defense. Since an employee could only get 2 of those write-ups in a rolling 13-month period before termination, we all would stay over, as well as skip our breaks and lunches to finish. Those write-ups were also less job-threatening as he would simply turn a blind eye to us clocking out for break or lunch and returning to work. But there was a catch. Since any approved overtime would count against his $73,000 bonus, approximately 11 cents per approved hour, he would never file the approval forms for the OT. This meant that it was considered unapproved, meaning that we were required to get approval to cut hours off our regular shifts to equal out what we stayed over. He, of course, never approved us to cut those hours. This was resulting in weekly write-ups from the same manager for unapproved overtime on those of us that made it to work every day, despite the weather, and missed holiday get-togethers with our families. Every week, we would get our write-up, and he would get praise for getting everything done with less approved staffing hours than typically allocated. Thankfully, write-ups for unapproved OT didn't carry a lot of weight. But for 3 months, they counted against your points for promotion opportunities. This went on until the week before Christmas. When I got my weekly write-up, I was told by the store manager, who offered me my promotion, I would be suspended for overtime abuse the next time my manager submitted a write-up for unapproved overtime hours. Determined not to lose my promotion, I started telling the manager no. The second time I refused to stay over without him signing an overtime approval form and giving me a physical signed copy before I hit overtime, he wrote me up for abusive actions toward a member of management and actions with intent to undermine the integrity of management and store policies. This instantly cost me my promotion, which greatly upset me. And then, like the idiot he is, he left me alone in his office to sign the write-ups and the acknowledgement that I was no longer promoting. Initially, I was going to just accept it and resolve myself to spending the next 13 months working my tail off for minimum wage and go up for a promotion as soon as they fell off. When I started reading the acknowledgement form, I found I was not eligible to promote to management until I was write-up free for 5 years. This meant 6 years and 1 month before I could even try to get promoted again, all because I followed policy. So rather than sign it, I wrote F off in Sharpie across his brand new desk, which he got for being such a great manager, walked out of his office, handed him my vest and name tag, shredded the write-ups and tossed them into the air like confetti, and told his no longer smug face that it was now my personal mission to get him fired. He lost his cockiness. When it sunk in, I just quit. I could see little beads of panic sweat forming on his forehead as he realized that the only person capable of performing certain highly essential functions for his shift was walking out the door. He shouted after me, telling me he could talk to the general manager and see if he could get the time frame cut down to 3 years. He offered to approve all of my overtime the rest of the season, offered me a cut of his bonus, and several other offers I can't remember. Honestly, if he'd offered to withdraw the write-ups, which was still 100% an option, but he never offered, I wouldn't have accepted it. But I might not have followed through on my threat. I was too angry and too determined, and I didn't care if I became homeless as long as I never had to work there again. Now, how did I get him fired? Well, due to certain ADA requirements, I was permitted to carry a voice recorder with me at work so I could record important meetings, announcements, and reminders. When I got written up the first time for unapproved overtime, I started recording his requests to both me and coworkers. I never used them to dispute the write-ups, but I never deleted them either. So I uploaded all the recordings to my computer, nearly 18 hours of audio, and sent it to the home office, CCing every store manager and compliance officer in the district. When I went in for my last paycheck, he was long gone. I was offered my promotion back, but I declined. The regional director then offered me my old manager's job with a $73,000 hiring bonus. Wonder where that came from, LOL. But I still refused and said I was never returning to retail. My former manager's boss laughed and told me that everyone returns eventually, and when I did, come see her and she would find me a management spot somewhere. After 5 months of being unemployed, living with my mom, and barely surviving, I moved to another state and got a job working in a state prison as a guard, and I'm very fulfilled. And our next story. I waste Karen's precious time. About a year ago, I was working at a local bagel restaurant that made both breakfast and lunch sandwiches. To set the scene, it's a Saturday afternoon and we're between rushes. This lady, we'll call her Karen, walks in asking for a takeout order that she's made online. My coworker on the register doesn't recognize her name and ends up going through the register to try to find it. After not finding it, my coworker asks her what her order was and tells her that we'll make it ASAP. She gets angry and starts going off on my coworker about how she's incompetent and that she placed it earlier that morning, that she needs to be somewhere soon, and that it must be in there. She apparently was in a hurry. Coworker goes through the register again and again, no online order. They finally get Karen to place her order, and it's put on the line: tuna and chicken salad. Girl wrangled Karen like a pro. I get the misfortune of making the order, and Karen is watching me make the sandwich like a hawk inspecting a field mouse. Tells me that one of the bagels is not toasted enough and that the other was burned. They weren't, but I remade them anyway. The next part is really where she reaches peak Karen. To preface, I was always trained to use one gloved hand to hold the bagel and an ungloved hand on the spreading knives. If I was handling meat or fish, it required 2 gloves, with exception to tuna and chicken spread because you use knives with those. Anyway, Karen stops me midway through her order and tells me to put on another glove. A bit annoyed with how closely she was watching me and with how she treated my coworker, I say, "Oh, of course." Put on another glove and wiggle my fingers at her to show the gloved hands. I go back to making her sandwiches. I finish the order and go to hand her the bag when she says, "Actually, I don't want those. Get me your manager." At this point, I'm more than a bit angry. This Karen comes into the shop, is angry at us, the employees, because we didn't receive her order for some weird tech reason, tells me how to do my job, and lets me complete 2 sandwiches before making me get my manager. So I go in the back and tell my manager there's a Karen waiting for her, not in those words, and go back out with her. I clean up nearby while my manager talks to her. Karen tells her that I was only using 1 glove and that I should be fired, to which she replies, "That's how I was trained, and that's how the restaurant is run. We've never had a health code citation for anything ever, and if she wants to look through the reports, she's more than welcome. To which the Karen backs down and says something about maybe wanting the sandwiches after all. Here's where the malicious compliance comes in. I knew that she was in a hurry to get somewhere, and her sandwiches are still on the counter. I pick them up, make dead eye contact with her, and throw them away. My manager, not noticing that I did this, turns to me and asks about the sandwiches. I smile and say I threw them away because Karen said she didn't want them and that they'll have to be remade. My other coworker, one that's doing the dishes, comes out completely oblivious to the situation. I give the order to him and warn him to use 2 gloves and tell him to take his time and make sure the order is perfect. It's not much, but I'm satisfied that I slowed her down. And our last story. Don't fax me on my landline in the early hours. We started getting calls from a fax machine on our landline a month or 2 after moving in. Not too painful, except it was at 2 a.m. on a Sunday night. After it happened a few times, I set up a PC to receive the fax and found it was a spam marketing fax. I called the company and they said our number used to belong to a business, so it was okay. I asked them to stop. They said they couldn't because it was an automated system and updates to the database were expensive. I used Google Foo to find their CEO's home phone number. When their fax machine rang me, I rang him at 2:15 on a Sunday. I only had to do it once. What did he say? He was somewhat groggy. It took a little while to get through to him what the problem was, and he tried to use the same excuse. I ended up just saying, whatever, I expect I'll be speaking with you the same time next week then, and then hanging up. The next week I was going to ring him when they rang me, then every hour after that. I'm almost sorry they fixed it. Really. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video, and I'll see you in the next one.